My name is Ninu Kang. I'm the Executive Director at Ending Violence Association of British Columbia. I'm going to be sharing with you some strategies about how to be more than a bystander. So what is an active bystander? Well, we know that majority of the people are good and that there are few small groups of people causing lots of harm. Sometimes it's through bullying, sometimes it's through sexual or partner violence. So when you see somebody that is being abused, it's no longer good enough for us to stand by. So an active bystander is someone that when they see something, they assess the situation and see if there is safety to intervene. And number two, there's a number of ways that we can intervene when we see someone being harmed. We can do it in a nonverbal way, which is to let the person know that you see what's happening to them, and so that they feel that someone else is there watching and in support of them. We can also, if we feel comfortable, we can also intervene verbally. And what's really important to know is to be more than a bystander approach is not a superhero approach. It's not something that we intervene and we create more violence or more harm. And it's important to check in with the person being harmed to see if they're okay. Often, the need to be more than a bystander is to let the person that's being harmed know that they're not alone in that. It's also important to ask them if you can support them after they've been harmed, if you can let them know about what resources and support that might be available to them. So why is active bystander intervention important? Well, that is that if we see someone being harmed and we don't do anything, it's as if we're condoning the behavior. And so the victim often finds themselves isolated, alone, and the violence will continue. So it's important that all of us take a stand and make sure that the victim is being supported. Well, the good news is, majority of the people don't cause harm. It's a small group of people causing harm, whether it's in sexual violence or whether it's in domestic violence. So it's no longer okay that we be a bystander. If we want to create change in our society and create a world that is safer for all, it's important for us to stand up when we see some forms of violence or someone being hurt. So why is it important for international students to know about Be More Than a Bystander program? Well, we know when students come to Canada, they're under tremendous amount of stress. But more importantly, it's important to know that young women who are coming over as international students may be under even more stress and may be more exposed to different forms of violence. It could be sexual violence, it could be partner violence, but it could also be bullying and exploitation by landlords or maybe experiences at school. So as young men, it's important for you to stand up and support your counterparts, the young women, young international students who are going to be in your classes, who are going to be your friends. It's important that when you see forms of violence being experienced by young women, that you say something, that you take a stand. It's important as young men that you stand up against violence or stand next to women who are experiencing violence in your lives. Gender-based violence is no longer acceptable in our society. We can do better. As international students, it's not only young women who are vulnerable to bullying and harassment or violence. Young men can equally be exposed. So it's important that when you see any form of violence, that you stand up and take a stand. So the question about how can you be an active bystander? Well, it's actually quite simple. You don't have to be a superhero. When you see something, assess safety. Make sure that you're not aggravating the situation even further. You can be a bystander by just non-verbally. Make sure that you look at the person who's experiencing any form of violence and you let them know that you're there. You can perhaps walk up close to them so that they don't feel alone. You can intervene without saying anything and interrupt the behavior. The other way you can do intervention is verbally. Again, you don't want to escalate the situation, but you might just interrupt and say something like, "Excuse me, can you tell me what time it is?" Again, it's a really non-invasive way of intervening, but what you're doing is you're interrupting that behavior. Now, often when you have these types of experiences of violence, it might be in a public place, might be at a party that you're at, it might be at a bus stop, it might be in a classroom. So when you intervene and you make sure that you're not escalating the situation, it's important to check in with the person that is being harmed after. Check in with them, see how they're doing, let them know that you're there to support them. There might be resources at the university or college that you're at. There might be resources in the community. If you feel comfortable, stay in touch with them. If you feel comfortable giving them your contact number in case they need to check in with you. They might need to make a police report, and if they do, it's important that you allow them to be able to speak to you if they need any support from you. Again, it's important to focus on the victim. The person that's caused the harm, you may not be able to do too much in the moment, but it is most important that you support the person that's being harmed. Over the years, I work with so many young men who are saying no more to gender-based violence. The truth is, women being abused is not a women's issue, it's a men's issue. And men like Varinder, the new generation, are standing next to women and saying no more. We want to end gender-based violence.
And given my own personal experience through work, through my personal interactions in my social life, in my personal life, it's been very important to me to remain an ally of women and model this behavior to young men on how we can intervene and how we can prevent such gender-based violence. The truth is, any movement where there's a power imbalance, those who lack power require the assistance and require allies of those who are, if you will, I don't want to use the word oppressor, but those who have the power in that relationship. And what that looks like may vary. But I remember when we were young and in school, they used to tell us, if you show up to a fight, you're encouraging the fight. If you do nothing, if you stand by. The same goes for gender-based violence. If you stand by passively and you do nothing, you are condoning and you're allowing it to happen. And there are things you can do, whether it's in an active role by stepping in and being vocal. It can be a passive role through subtle actions. But simply put, you can do something to prevent and stop such gender-based violence. I can say I've personally been in positions where you see gender-based violence taking place. And it's not a comfortable position to be in for the bystander. And I appreciate that. But it's not enough that because I or anybody may feel uncomfortable that we don't step up. And that's what I'd say. You don't have to be a superhero. You don't have to change the world. It's small steps. Simply being vocal. Hey, how's it going? Oh, just interrupting. Or creating a physical barrier by distraction is enough sometimes. Simply reaching out to the resources that this young man or woman may not be able to on their behalf may be enough. You don't have to be a superhero, you just have to play your part. And I would say to anyone who's in this position where they're feeling, or they're the victim, of gender-based violence, it can be a daunting task to have to call the police or have to reach out to some other legal resource. That can be a very daunting task. But you don't need to climb Mount Everest. You can simply call a friend. You can call a community resource.
So what resources are available to you if you're experiencing gender-based violence? Here in British Columbia, we have over 300 programs across the province in communities that you can access. Organizations like Mosaic provide frontline services on the phone and in person. As well, you can access resources in your school, whether it's at universities or colleges. And it's important to know that if you need to contact the police, call 911, and they can also provide you supports to community services.